Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters, and welcome to the Help How Do I Quilt It Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along. In this video series, I'm going to help you build your machine quilting design library by showing you some of my favorite designs for common quilt blocks, including chevrons, snowball blocks, log cabins, and more. To learn more about the video series or to get any of the exclusive products that you see in these videos, just click the link in the description box below or visit quiltingismytherapy.com. In this video, I'm going to show you some of my favorite designs for chevron blocks. I'm going to demonstrate how to quilt them on a sewing machine and a Longarm, and tell you how you can get free quilting diagrams. So, let's get to it. When it comes to picking out designs for chevron blocks, there are a couple things that I take into consideration. For instance, the shape of the block. Chevron blocks can be different shapes and sizes depending on the quilt pattern used. They might be more spread out, wider or thinner, or that inner V of the chevron might be shallower or deeper. The arrangement of the blocks themselves is also another thing that I take into consideration. For instance, are the chevron blocks all in a row? Or are they stacked on top of each other? Knowing how they lay out is going to help me pick out designs that will help me efficiently move from one to the other. And lastly, I take into consideration any secondary designs the chevrons might make. For instance, do those chevron blocks come together to form a star? Or are they kind of off by themselves? The good news is all the designs that we're going to learn in this video can be applied to most chevron blocks, no matter what shape, no matter what layout, and no matter what size. The first quilting design we're going to work with is the continuous curve. If there was ever an MVP of quilting designs, the continuous curve design would definitely be it. This design works in blocks of all sizes and all shapes, so of course I'm going to use it in my chevron blocks. In this example, we're going to start on one side of the block and end on the other. Starting from the corner and quilting a curve to this point, and out and back, and continuing until I reach the other side. So starting from that point, I'm going to quilt a line that arcs out to that inner corner. Then I'm going to arc out again to this point and back. For this design, I've decided I want to add another arc that hits that halfway point. If you want to, you could mark a reference point right there just to use as a guide, or you could freehand it. Either way is fine. Then curving out to the outer corner and back. I'm not worrying too much about those arcs being perfect. Instead, try focusing on getting the lines to hit those points as closely as possible. Once I have that first part, I can just continue doing the same on the other side. If you're using this design in larger blocks, you could add more curves, or for smaller ones, you could even add less. And when you're done, you have that beautiful, curvy kind of motif that really draws your eye to that inner corner. I love how this design starts on one side of the block and ends on the opposite side, making it perfect for chevron blocks that are in a row since it allows me to transition easily into the next block. For a slightly different variation, you can quilt the curves so that they start from the outer corner and curve out and back. This design brings you to the starting point, which makes it perfect for blocks that are kind of on their own. I especially love using this design in leafy shaped blocks or when I want something slightly less dense. But no matter how you continuous curve it, it's going to look great in those chevron blocks. What I love about this particular design is it's pretty easy to come up with some variations. So play around with this idea and see what designs you can come up with. For this next design option, we're going to use the dot-to-dot quilting technique to fill in the chevron block. Now we've just learned this technique in a previous free motion challenge quilting along, but I couldn't resist using it here. This geometric shape design is going to highlight the inner corner of the block and is perfect for chevron blocks of all sizes, since I can add more or less wedges depending on the area I have to fill in. Well, let me show you how it goes together. Starting from the inner corner, I'm going to quilt a line straight across the other side, stopping about 1/4 inch from the edge. Then I'm going to echo the side and return back to that starting point. Now that I have that first wedge, I'm going to add the next wedge by quilting a line that ends about 1/4 inch away from the previously quilted one. Then I'm going to echo the side and come back to that starting point. Then I'm going to add another wedge, filling in that half of the block as completely as possible. And now that I have that side done, I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now with this geometric design, if you want, you could freehand it or you could use a ruler, so we'll look at it both ways. I love how this geometric design really draws attention to that inner corner. It fills in that chevron and it just looks really nice. For larger blocks, you could add more wedges, or if you want less dense quilting, you could add less wedges. This design is just so nice and versatile because it can fit in blocks of all sizes. Now, if you want to highlight a different point of the block, you can quilt the lines so that they extend from the outer point. I especially love this design when it's a larger chevron block or a chevron block that's part of a bigger quilt block. And if you want to check out other ways to use that dot-to-dot design on other blocks, be sure to check out the dot-to-dot free motion challenge quilting along. It's on my YouTube channel, or you can visit quiltingismytherapy.com to find all those videos. The next design we're going to work with uses serpentine lines to add a soft, curvy look to your chevron blocks. It looks great in chevron blocks that are all by themselves, but I especially love using this design when I have chevrons that come together to form a star. When you have those serpentine lines next to each other, it kind of looks almost like a motif. Instead of quilting my serpentine lines so that they go in the same direction around the whole block, I'm actually going to change direction in the middle so that looks kind of more like a motif. So starting from that outer point, I'm going to quilt a line that curves down towards the other side, curving in to look like it's merging into the side. From this point, I'm going to travel along that edge just a little bit and then echo that line back to the other side. And I'm going to keep repeating those steps, quilting those serpentine lines until I get to that outer corner. Now once I get to that outer corner, it's time to change direction. And to help me do that, I'm going to quilt a line that kind of arcs out and back, just to kind of be like the center of my little mini motif. It's going to help fill in the space between the two directions of serpentine lines, and it kind of pulls both sides together. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, quilting those serpentine lines in the opposite direction. The serpentine line design can be tricky for some quilters, so if you're struggling with it, you can try marking out those lines beforehand just to help with that switch of direction. And then when I'm done, I have my serpentine lines that fill in that chevron, switching directions and kind of all coming together in that outer corner. Now I've already said how much I love to use this in chevron blocks that come together to form a star. So I'm going to do it again in this next block so we can see exactly what that looks like. For this particular design, I prefer to use it in chevron blocks that are about 2 inches wide or so. It can be harder to quilt that serpentine line in bigger areas, so if it's a much larger block, I'll probably use a different design altogether. There you can see the 2 chevrons quilted with those serpentine designs. I love how these little teardrops come together in the center and really kind of pulls all those blocks together. In this example, I started on one side of the chevron, worked my way to that corner and continued on. But you could go about it a different way if you'd like. You can actually start at that center and quilt it so it goes on both sides. And I'm going to show you what that looks like on the long arm. Starting from that outer corner, I'm going to quilt that line that arcs out and back. Just like we saw earlier, it's going to fill in that center area. Then I'm going to start quilting my serpentine lines, working up one side of the chevron. Again, quilting that line that angles out towards the other side, changing direction and looking like it's merging into the other side of the block. Once that side's filled in, I'm going to use traveling to get back to the bottom and then do the same on the other side. It just goes to show that you can go about quilting the same design in totally different ways. We could use the same design idea, except switch out the serpentine lines with feathers. While it might look more difficult, you just might find it easier since you're quilting that feather within a defined area. I'm going to start at that outer corner and start with that shape that arcs out and back. And then I'm going to use that to build my petals off of it. Now from this point, I'm going to work my way along one side of the chevron, quilting the petals of my feather. Quilting that line that arcs out, traveling back, and then quilting another petal so that it comes back to the side. And there I have my first set of 2 petals. And I'm going to repeat that, keep quilting those petals until I fill up that side. I'm kind of using the edge of the block as the spine of my feather. And now that that side is filled in, I'm going to travel along the edge to get to that outer corner again and do the same on the other side. Feathers add such an elegant look to your quilt, but they can be a little tricky to quilt. So if you're struggling with this design, check out the Feathers Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along, where I go into more detail on how to quilt this design. And while that feather has a beautiful, elegant look all on its own, when used in multiple chevrons, it creates a beautiful motif. Sometimes you want to keep it nice and simple. So for smaller blocks or for busier fabrics, I can quilt a simple V design by quilting a line that goes from that point to the outer corner and back. It's going to give it a nice geometric look, keep it nice and simple, and allows me to move on to the next block. And of course, you can either freehand this if you'd like, or you can use your ruler, whichever feels more comfortable to you. And there's my first line. If I want to add a little bit more quilting, I can add another line that echoes inside the area I just quilted. Just something nice and geometric to give it a beautiful look. And what I love about this design is if I use it in multiple blocks, it kind of creates a secondary design. I especially love using this in chevrons that come together to form a star. And just like all the designs we've seen for the chevron blocks, I can adjust them to fit blocks of all sizes. For larger blocks, I can add more lines, and for smaller blocks, I can add less. There are so many different ways that you can quilt the chevron blocks in your quilts. You can add some echo lines, or even treat a chevron kind of like a border corner and quilt a sashing design that wraps around. Whether you opt to go geometric with some dot to dot, add some nice curvy, continuous curve, or give it an elegant look with feathers, I'm sure you're gonna find the perfect design for quilting those chevron blocks on your quilts. And now it's your turn. If you're quilting along with me on the custom panel I designed for the challenge, fill in the areas highlighted in red with the chevron designs of your choice. You can use the ones I've showed you in the video or come up with your own design variations. And as always, I put together some free quilting diagrams to help you be successful with the designs that we've learned in this video. To download those, just click the link in the description box below. Well, I'll be back soon with the next video in the Help How Do I Quilt It Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.